Hello, my fellow gnomes, and welcome to episode number 19. And today we're going to be making a map selection system for our game. Now, currently we've only got the single map, which I'm whizzing about. But we've got a few more. So what we're going to do is we're going to add a new folder into server storage. Right, and we're just going to call this maps. And then we're going to click the grassland map and banish it down into the maps folder. So it's not actually in the workspace. And then I've actually got two other maps. So I've got a wasteland map, which I can paste into the workspace. There we go. It looks a bit like that. And I'm going to drag this one down into the maps folder as well. And then finally, I've created a map called Islands, which looks like this. And I'm going to throw that into my maps folder as well. So then I've got three folders inside the maps folder. If I wanted, I can click and drag them all in. Right, they're all going to be on top of each other and it all looks horrible. But there we go. Now, another thing we're going to need is a spawn point. Because at the moment, we just kind of spawn in and we just fall to the floor, which is fine. But if we're going to be sort of switching maps, we might not actually have a map on the floor, might we? So let's add in a part and just create a little kind of box to spawn people inside of. So we'll resize it, right? Nice big part just to kind of go over the top of the world. How big is this? Right, let's make it 40 by 40, okay? And then on here, we just make sure it's anchored. And then we can just add in some spawn points. There it is. And we're going to add, what, 1, 2, 3. And we can just make a little grid-like pattern with these. We can delete the decals on them. We don't really need them. And we'll just duplicate them a few times. So then we've got 9. That should be absolutely plenty. And then we're just going to go about making a little box as well. So we'll resize this, and up we go, and around we go, and then we'll just duplicate that, Control D, rotate it round, and then we'll just add on a little roof as well. So there we go, that's a box to keep everyone inside of. We can select the whole thing. Let's call the bottom of it base, so we can keep track of it, or the floor, we can call it floor. But we're going to select all of it, make it all 100% transparent, and make sure it's all anchored, which it is, and make sure can collide is disabled. So although it's going to be there, when you spawn in, you'll spawn in at the spawn point, but then you just fall through it anyway and fall to the ground. And we can probably disable this force field too. If we select all of our spawns and find the property where it says force field duration here and set that to 0. Select everything, Control G, and we'll just name this spawn box, okay? And we can keep it in the workspace. So now we click play, yeah, we drop down to the world, we haven't got the force field. So let's grab all of these maps, collect them back up, throw them back into the maps folder, okay? And even though it seems like there's nothing here, if we do spawn in, oh, no, hang on, wait. No, we want the floor to be set to, yes, sorry. We want all of this to be collidable. It was the spawns we didn't want. Make sure that spawns non-collidable. All the parts we do want to be able to collide with, don't we? So it'll keep us in place. There we go, so we can spawn in, and it's like we're running around in the sky. Right, there we go. So that's the first part done. Now we just need to make a GUI for our voting. We've got all these other UI bits, but we need to have a voting menu. So hit stop, head into our starter GUI, and find the game GUI. There it is. And add in a brand new frame, and we're just going to call this, we'll call this frame voting. It doesn't really need to fill the whole screen. So we'll maybe set it to be sort of 0.2 of the way across, 0.2, and 0.3 of the way down, sort of like that. And then size-wise, we'll set it to be 0.6 of the width, 0 extra pixels, 0.5 of the height, and 0. So something like that. And then we can put all our different boxes and such inside of there. We'll set this to be fully transparent. And now inside of here, we can add in a new frame. So let's just add in a new one. And we want, I think, maybe some text label as well at the top. The text can kind of be a title frame. So we'll name it title. And for the size, we'll set it to full, the width, 0, and then maybe 0.2 of the height and 0. Something like that. And then we'll just position our frame below it. So that'll be 1 of the width, 0, 0.8 of the height, 0, and position it 0.2 of the way down. So there we go, we've got our title and our frame, which we'll call maps. And we'll set this to fully transparent. And then inside of here, we can throw in some image buttons. So we'll add in an image button like that. And I'm going to make these fill maybe a quarter of the height. So 0.250, 0.250. Just going to make it weirdly stretched. But then if we set the size constraint to relative XX, then it will square it off nicely. We'll just name this map for now. We'll rename it later in a minute. Then we will add in a UI list layout and make sure that this is going to be fill direction horizontal, horizontal alignment center, and vertical alignment center as well. And then we can add in a few more maps like so. And maybe we want some padding, so we could set it to 10 studs of padding, just to give it that little bit of gap. And maybe we do want it to be lined at the top, actually, like so. That'll work, won't it? And then inside each of these image buttons, these are going to have an image for the map, but we're also going to need some text to tell us the name of the map. So we'll make this all the width, 0 pixels, and 0.2 of the height. Something like that will do. And then we'll name this title. And then we'll add another one to keep score of how many people have voted for it. So this will be called vote. And we'll position this to be 0.7 of the way down. Oh, that was the x-axis, 0.7 of the way on the y. And maybe we'll set this to be 0.3 of the height, like so. Make sure both of these, I don't think we want them to be white like that. That's a little bit ugly, isn't it? How about we set the background color to black, but then give it a transparency of like 0.2 maybe. And then obviously we'll set our font to Oswald. Make sure the text color is white and text scaled is enabled. That looks okay. And so the vote text will just say 0. Title will be the name of the map. Maybe we will add in a UI corner as well to this. UI corner to the box. And we're probably going to need to add it into both of these items too. There we go. So that rounds everything off. We probably want a UI corner for the title one as well. So we'll paste one in there. There we go. And we actually want this to be the same width maybe. Let's set this background transparency to be 0.3. Or what did we use for this one at the top? Let's use the same. So the message was 0.5. Okay, let's do 0.5 again. So where's it gone? Voting. Set the title to be 0.5. Yeah. And Oswald. And vote for map will be the text. Make sure that is scaled. And yeah, let's try and resize this a little bit to be like 0.8 and 0.1 of the way across. There we go. So it's not completely the same width, but it looks a little bit more proportionate. And it will work on mobile as well. If you click that little mobile icon at the top right here, We can see what it'll look like on a different resolution. That looks okay. You maybe want a little bit of gap between the top and the bottom there. So how about instead of making it 0.2 of the height, we make it 0.15? Or maybe sort of 0.18, just to give a tiny little bit of padding between the two. I think that's better. Then we'll delete these two templates and add in them like so. So we're going to have 3 maps. Obviously, you could have more. You could have a 4th map maybe. But we're just going to have 3 maps for our UI. And then for each of these image buttons, we're going to add in a screenshot of our map. I've already taken some, so I can just paste these in. Now we're going to need to set each of the names of these image buttons to be exactly the same as we've named them in our server storage. So make sure all the capitalization and everything is exactly the same so we don't have any mix-ups. So this is going to be named Islands. And then we're going to set the title text to say Islands as well. There we go. And then this one is Grassland. So we set the name of it to Grassland. And then we set the title text to be Grassland as well. And then rinse and repeat for the Wasteland map. There we go. And the text. Nice one. So we should have a UI something like this. And these names that we've got here for these 3 are identical to the ones we've got up here. Perfect. So once we've done all of that, let's actually set this voting frame to invisible. So visibility will set to false. And now it is time to start scripting it. Now currently we have all of this other UI just sort of always visible all the time. But we probably don't want it to be visible unless the game has actually properly started. So let's select the info here. And we will keep the message thing visible, but we'll set the stats and health. Both of them will set to visible is false. And the message we can keep it as game starting soon, I suppose. Or maybe we'd have it as waiting for players. Something like that. It doesn't really matter. We'll make sure we set the towers frame. Visibility will set that to false as well. Okay, so we'll revisit some of this UI in our local script in a minute. But now we're going to need to return to our main script and all our server stuff. Because obviously if we join the game now, we're actually going to get a bunch of errors, right? Because it's going to be looking for grassland because we'd hard coded grassland into all our scripts. And because it's no longer there, it doesn't really know what to do. So let's hit stop. And if we go into our main script, right, this is what I'm talking about on line 7, where we're just manually looking for grassland inside of the workspace, which it isn't there. So instead, what we're going to do is create a function to load in the map for us. So we might as well put this in our round module script. And right at the top, we'll create a function called round.loadMap. Okay. And probably a little bit later on, we'll have a function to do the voting as well. So we'd have a function called something like round.toggle voting. Okay, and for now, we're just going to set this to return the name grassland. Okay, later on, we'll have it do something a bit cleverer than that. But we'll make the local voted map, so creating a variable now, we'll set that equal to whatever round.toggle voting returns. Okay, so we're just setting it essentially to grassland, but this is laying the groundwork for us to then script it in a minute. So then we'll just check that the map actually exists, right? Because if for some reason maybe that map doesn't exist, we don't want it to cause an error. So we'll just check that it actually exists. So we'll go to the server storage. Do we have a variable for that? We do not. So right at the top, we'll go local server storage equals game get service server storage. and then we can search the server storage dot maps folder, find first child, and look for the name of that voted map. And if for some reason there wasn't a map, right, if the map didn't exist, if we don't have a map folder, then we're going to manually provide one. So we'll just say, if that's the case, then make map folder equal to, and then we are going to hard code it. So we'll just say server storage dot map dot grassland, because grassland is sort of like our default map. So whatever map you want to be your default, right, just type the name of it here. So once we've done all of that, then we can actually go about cloning it. So local, the new map will equal the map folder that we found, either whatever was voted for, or if there's some other kind of weird error. And we're going to clone it like so. And then we'll set the new map dot parent to be equal to the workspace. So that will load it in for us. But we still going to have this problem here back in our main script, because we're trying to get the humanoid of the base and so on. So rather than having this inside of our main script, we can select all of this, Control X, and move this into the load map function as well. So just below, we can paste this in here. And obviously instead of map, we need to use the new map variable. And we're going to need info as well. Remember, the info is our info folder in the workspace, which contains all of our object values. And you'll notice I just created a new object value there. And I'm calling, this is a bool value. And I'm calling this game running. Okay. So we're going to add in a new value object. And the reason we need this is because before, when we were using this simple variable and we're setting it to true and false, well, now we're inside of our module script, we can't access that variable anymore. So instead, we can use this value object, we can set it inside of the round module, we can access it from this script, and we can also access it from our local script, which we'll need later on. So let's delete this, and instead we can set the info dot game running dot value, and this is sort of the inverse to what we had before. So where we had a game over state, which we were setting to true here, now we're going to set the game running state to false. Oh, and let's make sure we've got a variable for info. So local info equals workspace.info. There we go. So that's going to change the value here. But in our main script, we're not going to be expecting that anymore. We scroll down, right, we're checking the game over thing. So let's swap that around. So this is keeping repeating until every enemy was killed, or not info dot game running dot value. So if everyone's been killed, or the game is over. And then here we're doing the victory if info is got game running dot value. If the game is still running and it's wave 10, then it's a victory state. And if, so get rid of the not game over and replace with if we're running the game, then we'll hand out that reward. And that's going to fix all of our logic down here. We can delete the map now, and we can call our function, which loads it in. So local map is now equal to round.loadMap. Okay. Let's go and click play. We might have broken some other things in the process. Let's see. Oh, we've got a problem with our tower module script. So if we hit stop, and because we're requiring it here, so we'll go to our tower module and find line number 12. And if we see on line number 12, we're calling the map again. Now, I think we only use the map inside the find target function. So let's move that down. And we'll just put it below here. Now, instead of setting it to be the workspace.grassland, we want to search inside of the map folder. So rather than setting the parent of the new map just to be inside the workspace, I'm going to add in a new folder into workspace, and I'm going to name this map. Okay. So kind of like we have for our mobs and our towers, right? We have these sort of counterparts. We have these folders in storage, and then when we're using them in the game, we then move them to their counterpart folders in the workspace. Well, we're going to have a map folder inside of the workspace that we actually move the map into. So we'll set its new parent to workspace.map. And then we know we can find the map by simply looking for whatever is inside of the map folder. So the map will equal workspace.map, and we'll just say find first child of class. And we'll search for a folder, because we're only ever going to have one folder inside of the map folder, and that folder that's inside of it is going to be the map. So it's going to be something like this, right? If I click and drag it, it will look like that when the game is running. So let's move that back. That should fix that problem with us on line 21. Now let's click play and see if that's done it. There we go. We have loaded in the map. And we're also going to need to now be able to spawn in. So remember how I named the floor of the spawn box floor so we can keep track of it? Well, now let's hit stop. And when we load in the map, let's say workspace.spawnbox.floor, and we could set the can collide, or we can even just destroy it, because we're not actually going to be reusing this or loading in any different maps. So we can just destroy it. But if you're wanting to sort of use the spawning all over again and load in something else, then you probably want to set it to can collide. But in our case, destroy is absolutely fine. So if we spawn in, it'll destroy the floor, and then we can spawn in like so onto our map. Now, we've still got the problem with our mob script now. So in our main script, we're getting the map variable here. Is it possible that we're not actually sending anything back? Let's check. We're not, are we? So at the end of the load map function, make sure we return that new map that we've just created. So then we'll be able to capture this here and then send this value off to our get wave value, and that should fix the issue there. Let's see. And here we go. We've got our zombies spawning in. We'll notice that all of our UI is broken, and that's going to be the next thing we need to fix now. So we're going to hit stop, and we'll take a look at our logic in our local script. So let's go to our game controller local script. That's it. And what we're going to need to do is find, because down in here we've actually hard coded the name of the map again, which is no good. I'm actually just going to go and delete these two lines right here. And I don't think we actually used the map variable at all. I think it was just the base variable that we were using. Here it is, in our setup GUI function. Now we're actually going to do this a little bit differently. Rather than just having this one function to do all the GUI, we're going to name this setup game GUI. Okay, so I'll rename that there. And then I'm going to create another function below called local function setup vote GUI. Okay, so this will enable the voting frame. So we'll just say GUI.voting.visible equals true. And then it will sort of toggle some voting and receive button presses and so on, right? We'll code all that in a minute. And then we're going to have a main function called load GUI, which now will do the load GUI when we first run the game. Now, if we remember, the only GUI that we want to be running all of the time is this message frame right here. So let's find where we set the message text. it should be in our old setup game GUI function. So where we're saying info.message.changed and then we set the text. Let's select this, Control X, and move this into our load GUI function. There we go. And then from here, we're going to call the setup vote GUI function. Like so. And now if I click play, I should see my voting frame. Cool. And we've got the little message appear on the top about the round spawning in. So let's stop the actual round from starting, shall we? So for now, let's just comment out everything in here, okay? So we can use these 2 square brackets and the dash dash and 2 square brackets. So we're going to require these module scripts, but then we're not actually going to start the round or do anything. So now if I click play, right, I just get the voting UI, because that's what we want to focus on, rather than getting distracted with the game running and kind of breaking things at the same time. It gets a bit confusing. So now we've just got this UI, let's focus on when we click each of these buttons. So head into our game controller script and into our voting GUI. Okay. So the local maps will equal GUI.voting.maps, and it's inside of this frame here, so we can get the children of them. And then we can do a loop, for loop. So for I map, or for I button, in iPairs, and using that map table that we've just got, so all those children we just grabbed, and we'll just check if that button, if it is a image button, because remember another child is the UI list layout, and we don't want to accidentally try and grab that one. We only want the image buttons. So if it's an image button, then now we can actually do a little function. So button dot activated, connect that into a function like so. And the only thing to do now is to tell the server that we are trying to vote. So we're going to create an event for ourselves now. If we go to replicate the storage to the events, and we'll add in a new remote event, and we'll call this one vote for map. And we'll need to retrieve that. So we'll create a variable for all the events. Local events equals replicate storage wait for child events. And then the vote event itself is the events folder, wait for child, vote for map. And then we will grab that event and we can call the function on it via server. And the information we want to send is the name of the button. And that's why it's really important that the names of our buttons are exactly the same as we have named our maps inside of the maps folder. Because we're using these to sort of reference what map we want. And if they're different, then it's not going to find the map. And in case there's any weird chicanery where they're firing off, right, a client's gone rogue and they're firing off random events, that's why I've done that check on the server to check if the map actually exists. And if not, we'll just go with grassland. That's why we did that earlier. So that's firing off the event. Now we need to process that back on the server. So head into our round server and we're going to create a new function round.process vote. And this will have 2 parameters, the player who fired the event and of course the data that we're sending, which is the vote itself. And then we need to link that in with the remote event. So let's make sure we have a variable for the replicated storage. Local replicated storage equals game get service replicated storage. And then we'll want one for the events folder. Events equals replicated storage. Wait for child events. And then it's simply a case of getting the actual event we want. So it's events, wait for child, vote for map, dot on server event. So whenever that fire server function, this one here, is called from the local script, whenever that's called, we want to connect that to our round.processVote function. So we just put it inside the brackets here like so. And for now, we'll just put a print. So we just check it's working. Print player, comma, vote. So we'll just print out those two values. Okay, let's hit play and see what that does. So we've got our UI up. Let's click islands. And it says in the output, GnomeCode islands. Click grassland. That says grassland. Click wasteland. And it says wasteland and so on. Now, we're not actually updating any of these UI counters at the moment. And we're not actually tracking what they're voting for. So how are we going to do all of this? Well, what we're going to do is we're going to create a table. So hit stop. And we're going to, at the very top, inside of our round module script. And remember, the round module is actually a table in of itself. But we're going to create a new table called votes. Okay, so it has these curly brackets. And votes, what this is going to look like is it's going to have a name of a map, like grassland. And then that's going to equal a table. And inside of this table, we're going to put the user ID of each user that votes for it. So we'll have like 1, 2, whatever, and then 09 something, and then 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and so on. So then that would be 3 votes for grassland. And then we'll have an island map, say, and that will have another table. And then maybe there's just the one user who voted for that one. So that's what the votes table is eventually going to look like. But we're not going to have it all defined, obviously, at the start of the game. We're going to be constructing it inside of our code. So let's delete all this. And now we know what it looks like. We're going to do inside of our round.toggle voting script. Now, the first thing we're going to do is we're going to get all of the maps. So local maps equals server storage dot maps, and we're going to get children. Okay, so all of these 3 maps, we're going to grab all of them, and then we're going to loop through them. So for I map in I pairs, and looping through the maps table, do, and we're going to add them to our table. Now, ordinarily, if you're going to be repeating this voting process, you might want to set the votes table and clear it out, right? Set it back to an empty table each time. But seeing as we're only going to be running this function the one time, this doesn't really matter so much. But regardless, right, let's add them in. So votes, square brackets. So we're setting a index of the table, and that will be the map.name. Because remember what we're doing here is we're saying votes grassland, essentially, and islands and so on. And so that's the index, and we're setting the index to a table, because we're going to have a table for each map. And then we're going to set, how about we have a little countdown? So we could say for 10, 1, -1. So we're counting down from 10 to 1. Oh, sorry, for I equals 10 to 1, and then going down by -1 each time. Do. And we'd set the info.message.value equals map voting. And then maybe in brackets, we'll put how many seconds are left. So ... to add on the value of I, and then another ... to add on the rest of the string, which will just be a closing bracket like so. And then we'll add on a short wait. So task.wait 1 second. There we go. And then before we calculate the winning votes and so on, we're going to need to actually process those votes now. So obviously all we need to do really is set the votes table, and then we get what they voted for, okay, which is the vote parameter, and we set that equal to their player dot user ID. Now we could do this, but then we would be having 100 votes potentially all from the same user, right? It's going to fill it up each time. We need to check if they've already voted first. So let's do a loop through the existing vote data. So for name, vote data, in pairs, I'm going to look through that table of the main votes table. So that's our for loop. And we'll say old vote, local old vote equals, and we're going to call the table.find function, table.find. Now, the thing about this function is if we've got tables inside of tables, which we do in this case, because remember, just to remind you, our table looks like this. And at the moment, we've just created one for each map. And it's got a table inside of that. Now, if we have an ID of 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, 4, and we just try to search the votes table, it's not actually going to find it. It's just going to find grassland. So this is why we've got the loop. So we're looping through each table inside the table, and then we can find 1, 2, 3, 4. So table.find will be the... Let's change that from vote data to map vote. Okay. So map vote in this case is going to equal this table right here. Map votes. Okay. So look through the map votes and search for the player.user ID. So in this case, searching for 1, 2, 3, 4. And if we find old vote, so if table.find returns anything, then we need to remove it. So table.remove, and we'll go to the map votes, and we will clear out that old vote we just found. And then we might as well break as well. We don't need to keep looking through the table anymore. And once we've done that, then we can go about and table.insert votes, vote whatever they voted for, the name of the map, right, with the square bracket, and the second parameter is the player.user ID, but we'll use table.insert. And there we go. So let's remove that example code. That's going to add in our votes. Now we can loop through them to find which was the most voted for. So now we'll create a variable called local winning vote. Initially this will be nil. And then we'll create one called local win score. Initially this will be 0 as well. And so then we're going to loop through for name map in pairs votes. So again, that big voting table we're going to loop through. And we're going to see if the number of entries in the map table, if the number of entries in the map is greater than the win score. So remember, this is the amount of IDs that are inside the table for the map. Then we're going to check. And so if it is, then the new win score is just however many there were inside of it, okay? So as long as there's more than 0, then it's always going to be greater because we set it to 0 initially. So if there was 2 people that voted for it, then the new win score is going to be 2. And then the winning vote will just be equal to the name of this map. And then once we've done all of this, we can then return the winning vote, okay, rather than hard coding it to grassland. So how about we just add in a quick print here? So if there was an old vote, then we'll say print switching vote from old vote to switching vote. We'll just say old vote found. Vote found. And then down here we'll just say print processed vote for, comma, and the name of their vote. Okay, so this is just a few print statements so we can see what's happening. Let's hit play. We haven't got any errors. That's a good start. We haven't got any countdown though. What's going on there? We've got some kind of error going on. Table expected got nil. Let's find out what's going on here then. I think we haven't actually called our load map function, have we? We still got it all commented out. Right, if we can remove these comments, remove that, and remove those brackets at the end. There we go. Click to run it again. And yeah, there we go. Map voting. We've got a countdown now. 5, 4. We're clicking grassland. Process vote for grassland. Click on wasteland. Old vote found. And then it processed the vote for wasteland. And it's actually loaded in now our wasteland map. So we know it's actually working for us. Awesome. Obviously, there's a few things we need to clean up. We need to get rid of the UI and so on. And we also want to log so we can see what the votes actually are. So at the moment, it's all kind of hidden on the table. We can't actually see what the data is. So when we place a vote, we want to be able to see how many other players have voted for each map, don't we? We want to see what the current scores are. So let's hit stop. And let's create another event for ourselves. A new remote event. Call this update vote count. Okay. And then this event, we can then fire back whenever they place a vote. So when we process the vote and we've done all of this, we will say events, wait for child, update vote count. And instead of, so then when we do fire client, instead of firing to a specific player, we can do fire all clients. We'll send the information to every single player in the game. And what we're going to send to them, the data, is our votes table. Okay, so this votes table we've been creating, right? That we didn't really know what the values were. Well, we can just send that to each client. So they're going to get all the data and they can look for themselves. So then in our game controller, we need to process that data we're receiving. So in our setup vote GUI function, let's do it after this. We're going to need a variable for this, aren't we? So local vote count update, we'll call it. Then that will equal events, wait for child, and what do we call it? Update vote count. So the vote count update dot on client event. Whenever we're fired, that remote event is sent towards us. We're going to connect that into a new function. And the parameter, the information we're receiving, is the map scores, isn't it? The scores of all the votes. So then we're going to loop through them all. So for name, vote info in pairs, map scores. Let's do scores plural, makes more sense. Do. And then we can see if a button actually exists for the vote that we found. Is there any weird tricks going on where there's been a vote placed that we haven't actually got a button for? We need to just check. If button, or no, we'll create a variable to search. Local button will equal the GUI.voting.maps and find first child using the name, okay, that name that we're looping through. And if we have got a button, then we'll set the button and we get that vote text label we created. I can't type today. Vote, there we go. Remember, inside of each of these image buttons, we had a text label called vote. And we want to change the text of that to be equal to whatever information is in the table. So vote.text equals, and would be the amount of entries in that table. So the hashtag, that tells us how many items are in a table. Hashtag vote info, like so. Now let's see if those update for us. So we'll click play. and we click on one of these, it says 1. Click on the other one, that goes 1, that goes 0. And we can see that it's all updating for us. Fantastic. So we'll keep it on islands. And there we go. We've spawned into the island map. Nice one. So the only thing to do next is to clear up what UI is on screen. Because obviously we don't want to still be able to place votes while the game's running, do we? So hit stop. So just like we've told the voting frame to be visible inside of the setup vote GUI function, inside of our setup game GUI function, we're going to need to set that back to false. So we can copy this line if we want, and at the top we'll set that equal to false. And then there's a few more frames we want to turn on inside here. So GUI.info.health.visible, set that equal to true. GUI.info.stats.visible, we'll set that equal to true as well. And then we need to set the GUI.towers.visible equal to true. And then we just need to grab the base to set up in order to set up the health. Because before this was just hard coded, if you remember, to the map itself. So we can grab the map pretty easily. Although it's possible, if we're having multiple players loading in, that the map might not have loaded in yet. And it might have already loaded for other people. So we check if the map is currently in the workspace. So if workspace, go to the map folder, and then we'll find first child of class and look for a folder inside the map folder. So if we've found a map, then we can just call this function, okay? Obviously it's not base, it will be map wait for child base, like so. But alternatively, if we haven't got a map already in the game, then we need to wait for it to be loaded in. So we're going to use the workspace.map.childAdded function. So this will be a function that is fired whenever anything's added. So connect to a function, and the parameter will be whatever item is added. So seeing as we know it's only ever going to be a map that's going to be added into that folder, we'll name it new map. And then we can call the health.setup function again using that new map parameter. There we go. So that we're going to fix our health UI and so on, turning everything to true. The only thing we need to do now is actually run this function. So again, we've got a similar situation here where if we get multiple players loading into the game, we don't know who's loading in first and what items are going to have loaded into the game and what stage the voting is at. So what we're going to do inside of our main load GUI function, we're going to just call both functions. Set up vote GUI and set up game GUI. We're going to call them both. And then in order to keep track of the current state, like we've got this info game running bool value, we're going to create another one. So we can add in a new bool value. And this is one we're going to call voting. And so when setup vote GUI, when that runs, we will set this equal to true. Okay. So info. So not set true. We'll check if it's true. Sorry. So if info dot voting, or we could check if it's not true. If it's not true, if info.voting.value is false, then we'll return. Then don't run the function. Don't even bother doing any of this if voting hasn't been enabled. And we can do the same thing inside our setup game GUI function. But instead of being the voting value, this will be the game running.value. So only if the game running is true is this going to run. And then we can check, right, whenever any of those values change. So if info.gameRunning.value, game running should change at any point. If it does, then I want you to connect and run the setup game function, setup game GUI function. And similarly, if the info.voting value should change at any point, then I want you to connect and run the setup vote GUI function. Okay, and so that's the handling the logic on the client, our local script. Now we just need to make sure we're actually setting the values of these in our server scripts. So let's head over to main. And well, we know once we start doing this, once the map has loaded in, then we know that info.gameRunning.value is going to be true. True. There we go. And when we toggle the voting inside of our round script, when we toggle voting, we could do this down here even. Info.voting.value is going to be equal to true. And once we've finished all the voting, after our time is finished and we've looped through to check the scores, then the info.voting is going to be .value is going to be set to false. So that should hopefully keep track of all our values. We'll hit play. Have we got any errors? We haven't. Okay, we're going to place a single vote for the Wasteland map. Got a score of 1. It seems to be working. It reaches 0, and all of our game UI has now set up, and the voting UI has disappeared. So we can add in our sling or something, and he'll spawn in, and it seems to be working for us. Fantastic. And when the zombies approach and knock out our tower, we get our game over screen. Cool. So let's hit stop. That's pretty much our voting all working. One more thing we might want to do is organize our main script a little bit more. We probably don't want to keep all of this stuff. If we want, we could create a brand new function inside of our round module. And we could sort of chuck everything inside here. We could go function round.start game. And then we could copy everything we put here. Select all of this. And Control X and Control V it into here. We're not going to need the info anymore. We've already got that variable up there. We can delete that. And oh, we need a players service. We can get that easy enough. We'll create a players service. Players equals game get service players. And now all we'd have to do is say, yeah, round.start game. How neat is that? So if we play, it should all work the same as before. We can place our vote and so on. And eventually, when the voting is finished, 1, 0, and there we go. Now, you might not want the game to start unless, say, you've got a certain amount of players. So if you want to do that, what you could do is now we've got our main script cleared out. It's a little bit easier to see what we're doing. So we'd create a variable, say local minimum players. We'll set this equal to 2. And then we can use the player service to see whenever anyone's added. So players.player added. Connect this into a function, and which gives us as a parameter the player who has been added. And then we need to check the current amount of players in the game. So the local current players equals hashtag players get players. So players get players gives us the table, and the hash icon tells us how many things are in that table. So then we'll check if the current players is greater than or equal to the minimum players, this amount we've set up here. So if it's greater than or equal to 2, then we will say round.startGame. Otherwise, else, what we could do is set the workspace.info.message.value equal to waiting for, and we could just type more players. But if we want to have a live update of how many we're waiting for, we could just have to say min players minus current players. Right, do a little calculation. Wrap it in brackets to make it a bit clear what we're doing. And then dot dot on the end. Bit more string. More players. Like so. There we go. And maybe we will we'll put the S inside a bracket as well. So it could be 1 player or 2 players. Looks like a little bit better English, I think, if you do it like that. We don't even need the server storage anymore. We can delete that. So there we go. We've got our main script down to 17 lines. And now if we play, game starting soon. And has our message updated? Oh, it says waiting for 1 more player there, but our UI hasn't updated. Why not? How about we head into our game controller script? I think it's because the message is being set before the change can be detected, before this local script is even running. So we'll just set the very top. We'll say GUI.info.message.text, and we'll just set it equal to whatever the value of info.message is. So if that's set before this has had time to detect the change, then it'll just be set anyway. So now if we click play, hopefully we should see. There we go, waiting for 1 more player. And if I was to set it to a minimum of 3 and click play, then it should say, yeah, waiting for 2 more players. And if I click stop, because we haven't actually tested this with multiple players yet, have we? So go to our test tab, and we can start a local server with just 1 player initially. And wait for this to load. We get this window, allow access. And here is our player loading in. So he's got to wait for 2 more players before he can do anything. Then we'll click and 2 and click start, and this will give us 2 more windows with 2 new virtual players. Here they go. These are spawning in now. And now the voting has triggered, so they can, 2 of them can vote for island, say, and the 3rd guy, he really wants grassland. But however much he wants it, he's not going to get it, because it's going to be islands. And here we go. They can all play and place their units and so on. Pretty cool, right? If we can find a tower to place. There we go. Islands is a bit of a tricky map because you've not got much range, have you? It's a bit tricky to play when you've got 3 different players to keep track of. But there we go. We have got our working tower defense. We've got our different maps. But we do need a lobby pretty soon. Because we don't want just to be stuck in a floating box in the sky for too long. But that's enough for today. That will be all for another episode. Thank you very much for watching. Hopefully, you've been able to follow along. And hopefully you found this helpful. I'm struggling today, folks. But if you've enjoyed today's video, please leave a like. And if you've not subscribed already, I don't know why you wouldn't have. But if you haven't, then please give me a subscription. It helps a lot. And I'll see you all in the next time. Goodbye!